What do you look for when you're buying safety gloves and equipment to work on hybrid vehicles? It's important to have the correct safety gear and equipment. It isn't something a shop should buy because it's the cheapest. Make sure the gear and equipment meet the safety requirements. You have to have eye protection because a arc over can cause an explosion. And I don't know what this guy has stuck in his lens there, but it looks like it saved his eyesight there. And of course you want to wear good eye protection. Here we have a lineman climbing up a pole. That's high electricity. That's high voltage. You know, he's got on his Class 0 rubber gloves. They're rated at 1,000 volts. And you can see they're protected. The glove itself is protected by leather protectors. Now here's a guy with the glove and the leather protector on, and here we've divided the leather protector from the glove. The Class 0 glove is actually the red glove at the bottom. But you don't want to take a chance of damaging it and snagging it and poking a hole in it. You want it to protect you from the high voltage. So we protect the glove with the leather protector. You shouldn't use the glove alone. And here the guy's got it on. Now remember that these gloves are going to have a shelf line, so you have to test them. Gloves should be electrically tested following this specification. You can read it as well as I can say it to you. But every time you use them, you should test them. What this guy is doing at the photograph there is he's rolling the glove up tightly so he traps air in there, and you can see the glove's expanded. He wants to know if there's a leak in it. But you should have them tested, and you can get them tested where we get them tested, right here. Now, you can go to glovetesting.com. You can Google search or any other search engine you want, electric glove testing, and you'll see a lot of different laboratories that will help you. This one seems to get our gloves back fast enough to us. Now, use safety gloves anytime you're going to come in contact with high voltage, you know. And these high voltage we're talking about is 330 volts, 200 amps, or 66,000 watts, or even a Honda at 144 volts is enough power to hurt you and damage you and cause injury and possibly kill you. And this pair right now, they're pulling a battery pack out. They're doing a very simple task, but they have their safety gloves on and in place. Now remember that the hybrid high voltage system is not grounded. So the high voltage wiring does not use a ground return, meaning both a positive and negative wire is going to be used. And we're going to have to test that against loss of insulation. Now in ground fault detection, part 4 of the safety videos, it may have very well found the fault and told you through a diagnostic trouble code it's a wire or an inverter or converter, whatever it is. So at least look up the diagnostic trouble codes. And then check for the insulation from the ground during the loss of insulation test is important because it checks for leaks to ground, this high voltage to the ground. And of course you've got to use the correct equipment there. Now a DVOM should be labeled with a category, a CAT rating. Now this is rated by the International Electrotechnical Commission, the IEC. Basically the CAT rating is concerned with the potential arc over conditions that might cause the meter to explode in your hand. And it says here it can lead to injury. I think if a meter explodes in your hand, you're going to have an injury. And that's where that shrapnel comes. That's why you need those safety glasses. Now here's my favorite DVOM. I took a photo of the front and the rear, and it does not have a CAT rating on it. This is not intended to be used on a hybrid. I had to go out and purchase a CAT 3 meter to work on hybrids. Now here's the CAT ratings, 1, 2, 3. 3 is what we're concerned with. It's 3-phase AC distributed. It's hybrid. It is the hybrid meter, CAT 3. Here's a telephone pole on the left, and you can see all the power as it goes down to work on big industrial type motors, small electric motors, and a clock hanging on your wall there. And you can see that they have the CAT ratings at the bottom. And we put in hybrid. CAT 3 is hybrid. Now here's a block drawing, and you can see the orange wires are connecting high voltage between the battery pack, the converters, the inverters, the traction motors, the high voltage processor, and those circuits are isolated. They're not ground. You don't see any common ground there, as we told you. So we're going to have to test that. We're going to use multimeters that have high voltage insulation testing capability, Cat 3 rating. The high voltage harness insulation test is tested with high voltage from a tester, and the resistance is 1 to 2.2 meg. In the lower left hand corner, we have a handheld unit, and that's the one we have, and it uses the battery and inverter, a converter, of course, to make the high voltage to test the insulation resistance. On the right side is a Mego type meter, and you crank it to make the high voltage. Whatever you're going to use, we use the easy one to use. It's a Fluke 1587 if you care. It's a Cat 3 rated at 1,000 volts, measures insulation deterioration of the conductors with the high voltage pulse, has different levels of voltage, and that's what it does. In the lower left-hand corner, you can see insulation test. You push that, and then you start selecting how high of a voltage do you want to test. And in the case of the right, we selected 250 volts. You can go all the way up to several hundred volts. I don't know what the top is. I know it goes high enough to test the escape, which is 330 volts. Now, when you're using this meter, high voltage workers, guys who work on this stuff every day, all day long for their living, traditionally use the one-hand rule. That means that only one hand at a time can be used to work on a high voltage circuit. The other one's in your pocket or behind you. And if that's convenient, that's convenient. If it's not, it's not. But if your one hand isn't doing anything, put it behind you, because you don't want to bend over and lean on a high voltage circuit, even with your high voltage gloves on. Now, be safe. Do not back probe high voltage connectors, as this can damage them. Don't use any sprays, including cleaning sprays, around these high voltage circuits, as this can energize the air surrounding the circuit, making it conductive. So be safe. Now, things to remember. Safe measurements of high voltage, high current circuits require discipline and awareness. Use the one-hand rule. There's no shortcuts. Proper procedures and equipment are essential. So you take your meter, you connect the tester to the circuit to be tested, and to ground. And don't forget, if you have a ground fault, you're going to have a code, and it'll tell you where to test. And you can see our meter here. We chose 550 volts on the left and 550 volts on the right. You can see that we're probing into a certain cavity of that high voltage connector. How do I know it's orange? That's how I know. It uses the color code orange. And here we're showing an extended version of that. We're going and taking the meter between wherever the code told us to go and chassis ground, and that little yellow squiggly line is telling us that there's a leakage of high voltage to ground, and our meter is going to tell us how much. Now, insulation testing. If leakage is detected, disconnect the wiring and check for leakage in that harness alone. Now, it's great if it's only that harness alone. If the harness tests normal, check for leakage inside the inverter units, the converter units, wherever the code leads you, and then replace the component that shows the leakage.